Chapter 21 to 22. It seems that my worries were unfounded, thought Seal, as she gazed at Benamaru through the system of the word. I did grant many of Master's subordinates a vision of what they would eventually face, so that they would not relax as much as they would in the previous timeline, but I did not expect for Benamaru to immediately try to confide in Master. Well, as expected of Master Rimmeru. All of his actions so far, in some shape or form, have created waves that have aided in the development of his subordinates and allies. Seal mentally groaned, walking around in circles. Though she is current and tangible, so she simply walks through obstacles. If only Ivaraj's memories gave some sort of clue to his ability, then we could just forget about this arduous process. After analyzing his dead corpse, none of the skills he had were related to his ability, so I concluded that it was instinct. Using his aura in some way to prevent us from traveling without risking implosion of time. Something that I still cannot fully understand. How does one destroy time? Control it, sure, but destroy it, causing it to cease to exist. Not to mention that Ivaraj was just a being of destruction with some reins put on him. And his memories always screamed, I will destroy everything. I can't analyze techniques when all of his memories are corrupted. As for how his memories relate to his technique, there is no feasible explanation. No, his mindset maybe. But how? Even with the Akashic records, nothing is recorded there that has the ability to destroy time. Sure, there is creation. Yes, there is destruction. There is also the ability to control time. But destroy it, it should be impossible. Time is necessary, and relative to each being. However, it cannot exist without space, but space exists even when time is stopped, as time is something that is observed, but that doesn't help. Seal paused, taking a deep breath, before calculating more possibilities and predicting the future. Focus on the present, Seal. There should be no major changes in the Orc Lord fight, perhaps less casualties, but that's it. And it would be my role to deal with any outliers. She sighed, before continuing her line of thought. Lord Rimmeru would probably disagree with me giving his current subordinates glimpses of the future, due to both his paranoia and viewpoints. He doesn't want to shake up the timeline, nor does he want to brainwash his subordinates' loyalty, which I respect greatly, but unlike my master, I do not care about his subordinates. Only him, and his happiness, which so happens to extend to said subordinates. Not to mention, the experiences that he had in the previous timeline were not fake. How would it be brainwashing if I simply gave them back their memories? But then again, I do not fully understand emotions, so I digress. She then turned around to head back to her master. She would be the one working in the dark, ensuring that no outlier influenced the timeline. At least not the early one. However, she would also ensure their loyalty. At the end of the day, her actions aimed to help Rimmeru's subordinates grow, and protect her master's happiness. Even if it cost her her relationship and trust with Rimmeru. Unbeknownst to her, the fact remained that even if she could understand Ivaraj's technique, it's not as if she would be able to stop it. Not without understanding, or rather embracing, well, something more abstract. Asterisk 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 asterisk. It seems like Gabaru has made his move again. Not that I can blame him, since he was manipulated by Laplace, but I'm still calling him an idiot, thought Rimmeru. He was currently sitting on Ranga's back, heading through the forest. With the speed at which he was going, the wind easily blew his hair back behind his head. Story continues below. He closed his eyes. It seemed like everything was going according to Seal and his predictions. They had already rescued the lizard woman that would eventually be known as Soka, killed several orcs along the way, and were already heading towards the main battlefield. Rimmeru contemplated for a while, having already sent Soe to rescue the lizard men chieftain. He thought about how to deal with the Orc Lord as swiftly as possible in order to reduce casualties, while also allowing the Kijin under his command to deal with their heightened rage. It was likely that more orcs would have to suffer as a result, but he wished to prevent that. The orcs were crucial to the rapid industrialization and modernization of Tempest, after all. As such, he turned around to look at Benamaru, who was riding another direwolf behind him. Rimmeru then spoke up. Benamaru, I know that this may seem redundant, but I must ask you, why is it that you want to kill the orcs? Benamaru turned to look at his current lord, confused as to why he was asking this sort of question. The Kijin opened his mouth, before closing it. His lord wouldn't ask an obvious question for no reason. Pondering for a bit, and not thinking of anything else, he simply responded with the obvious answer. It is to avenge my father, my family and my clan, Lord Rimmeru. He saw the way his new lord pursed his lips, indicating that his answer was not the correct one. Is that answer not correct? He added, prompting his master to respond. Sometimes, the best path to revenge isn't an act of violence, but to simply move on in life. Rimmeru started. Revenge can consume a person, and they can be blinded to other factors beyond their control. Rimmeru then made eye contact with Benamaru, golden eyes burrowing into orange-amber ones, quickly putting out any flames of anger that Benamaru may or may not have had. For instance, if a monster killed your father, because your father killed his father, then what would you do? Kill that man and justify it as justice. Then his son would search and kill you, and so on and so forth. Rimmeru turned away, ignoring his subordinate's now pensive and conflicted expression. A cycle of revenge and death. Kill or be killed, kill and be killed. The strong prey on the weak, and it's the fault of the weak for being so. Consequently, the weak aim to get strong, and either avenge their fallen brethren, or die in the process. That is the current sense of this world, and I wish to change that. Granted, I may be hypocritical by using my own power and influence to change things, but that is the only way that this world will change. Through power, influence, and example. Please think on that, Benamaru, as you fill the hole in your heart. Finishing his thoughts, Rimmeru turned away to focus on the battle ahead, while keeping an eye on Benamaru to analyze his reaction. All he got was a pensive face. Rimmeru's thoughts eventually turned towards the battle ahead, sending a telepathic message to Ranga and the goblin riders to use Shadow Step to get to Gabiru's location, while he immediately took to the skies. As a side note, he also noticed that Laplace was already retreating after his confrontation with Trainee. The stage was all set. Now, let's get this over with. Asterisk 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 asterisk. The trembling of the ground was felt throughout the battlefield, filled by the injured, the dead and the dying. The thousands of orcs, blinded by ravenous hunger, could only look on in shock as massive fiery spheres of black flames consumed their brethren by the hundreds. Hundreds more would be cut down. Story continues below. It would seem as if this attack was indiscriminate at first glance, but this was far from the case. The orcs had surrounded the lizardmen and their goblin allies, painting the perfect and obvious target for a massive bombardment from above. Eventually, the bombardment died down, before a deafening crash was heard. A large quantity of dirt and debris was launched into the air, crushing some unlucky orcs as gravity pulled the pieces back down. As the smoke and dirt cleared, it became obvious who were responsible for the sudden attack. Benamaru, Shion and Hakuro, appearing out of the dust, temporarily eyeing their opposition, before beginning their attack. No words were needed, as hundreds were cut down, decapitated, or simply launched to their deaths. Yet Benamaru still pondered, wondering what his master had meant. Perhaps, was it for him to question what he would do next, after his vengeance was satiated? Or, was it something else? Asterisk 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 asterisk. As more orcs were killed or maimed across the entire battlefield, Rimmeru watched everything from above, through an improved version of the Eye of God technique that he had used during the war with the Eastern Empire. That technique had been reliant on sunlight and refraction, while now there was no need for light at all as Seal used magicils instead. Similar to magic sense, magicils were now being fed through the same patterns that light would have been sent, allowing for the user of the technique to see much further and more accurate pictures. Soe had rescued the chieftain, per future Sokka's wishes, and has already cleared the caves that the lizard men called home. Gabiru has been rescued by Gobta and the Goblin Riders, and had also come to the same conclusion that Gobta was somehow the secret leader of the village. Ranga had begun his rampage by calling upon the vast tornadoes, channeling his anger after an orc had insulted both him and his master. Benamaru and the rest have already engaged the Orc Lord, who was not the Orc Disaster yet. Gelmid was still alive, after all. Notice. It seems that the individual Gelmid has been killed by the Orc Lord. The evolution of the Orc Lord into the Orc Disaster has commenced. I stand corrected. Looks like things are passing by quicker than expected. Rushing towards the action, Rimmeru lands right in front of the now newly crowned Orc Disaster, cratering the ground, before immediately rushing towards his opponent. He ignored the cries of warning from the Kijin behind him. There is no need for banter, nor need to negotiate. As far as I am concerned, I just need to defeat the Orc Disaster without revealing too much to Clayman, Carrion, Frey and Milam. The less they know about me, the better. Only Milam is curious enough to risk the pact with Veldora at this time, despite the fact that Veldora no longer exists. It should be noted, Master, that the Kijin have already fought with the Orc Disaster and have adjusted to their newfound power. Thanks for the info, Seal. Taking his tachi that he had attached to his waist, he immediately slashed at the Orc Disaster, cutting a large gash into the Orc Disaster left side. The Orc Disaster, stunned, turned around to face the newfound threat while regenerating its wounds, only to then realize that right arm was now missing. Bisected at the elbow, the wound was now burning with black flames. Not giving the Orc Disaster a chance to recover, Rimmeru blasted the unique monster with a barrage of water blades and icicles, which either slashed through or embedded themselves within the beast's flesh. Story continues below with a mighty roar. The Orc Disaster unleashed a vast amount of aura, ending the barrage by throwing the projectiles off course, before ripping off the stump of its arm to allow its regeneration to kick in. It then launched a barrage of its own, red orbs of energy aimed towards its opponent. To no avail, as Rimmeru simply recognized the path of each projectile and avoid each one, slowly walking through the barrage of energy until he was in range of the Orc Disaster. Surprised, the Orc Disaster immediately struck at Rimmeru from above, with an oversized butcher knife that seemingly came out of nowhere, only for Rimmeru to sidestep the attack once again and kick the beast in the stomach, sending it flying a good distance away. As Rimmeru rushed the beast again, the Kijin that were observing the battle stood in silence and in shock. After all, it was not every day that they saw an opponent that they could not beat be manhandled by their master. Though they would eventually get used to it, as Rimmeru was not called an abnormality for nothing. He's beating the pig back like it's nothing. As expected of Lord Rimmeru, thought Xian, watching in admiration that their newfound master held this much power. To think he would be able to launch a being that large that far with a single kick. Thought Benamaru. Though, why is it that I am feeling exasperated with myself? Like I shouldn't be surprised that Lord Rimmeru is able to achieve such impressive feats. Hell, why do I feel like I should be expecting more? It doesn't make sense. I am not done yet. A declaration brought all the Kijins out of their stupor, as the Orc Disaster unleashed its Chaos Eater attack. Deranged heads made out of reddish-brown gas shot out from behind him, aiming to bite and shred Rimmeru to pieces. Some cratered into the ground, taking deep bites into the dirt, before rising back up and continuing to chase their supposed prey. Rimmeru retreated a few steps, taking a stance with his left leg slightly in front of his left. He then bent his left knee, and dashed forward, slashing at all the incoming heads one by one. One was cut in half, the other decapitated, while a third was dodged entirely. This pattern continued, until Rimmeru had once again gotten into his opponent's guard. Only difference being that this time the orc disaster had expected him, and had already prepared a large swing from Rimmeru left. The butcher knife met no resistance and cut straight through, leaving a bisected blue-haired Majin, or so the orc disaster thought. In reality, the orc disaster had hit an after-image, missing Rimmeru entirely. Rimmeru suddenly appeared in midair, his body upside down, behind the orc disaster's head. This was followed by the sound of sword cutting flesh and bone, as the leader of the orcs' head went flying. This technique that Rimmeru had just used had been dubbed Thundering Chaos by Veldora, who had started to name Rimmeru techniques out of boredom. The technique composed of multiple chained attacks, with each strike being stronger than the last. The final strike involves dashing or teleporting behind the enemy while leaving an after-image or clone, ensuring that the opponent is caught between two fronts. Usually, Rimmeru's sword would be cloaked in Veldora's Storm Energy or Rimmeru's Null Energy, with the former being a part of the Storm series and the latter being a part of the Void series, or Void Collapse. It should be noted that Veldora was also playing with the name Ascension of the Raging God for the latter version of the technique. Rimmeru was completely unaware of the naming of the techniques. In this battle, however, Rimmeru only used the black flames which were currently set ablaze at the stump of the orc disaster's neck. Benamaru, noticing that their lord had done what Hakuro had tried during their own fight with the orc lord, immediately warned Rimmeru of what was to come. Despite the black flames preventing the regeneration, Benamaru could not shake the uneasy feeling in his chest. Lord Rimmeru, the orc disaster may still regenerate. Immediately after Benamaru said these words, the orc disaster grabbed its detached head with his left hand, and chopped off the stump of its neck with the weapon in its right hand, in an attempt to allow its regeneration to continue. However, it then lost its left arm to another attack made by the slime. The reason behind Rimmeru's aggression was not a conscious decision on his part. Rather due to his experiences, Rimmeru had subconsciously started to show no mercy during battle, unless his opponent was someone that he cherished deeply. Seal also ran interference, making sure that no skills or abilities that would shake up future events were used. Master, it would be best to let the orc disaster regenerate now and activate Void God Azathoth to absorb him. It would seem that unique skill Predator would be used instead, though I am unsure what Milam will see through her Milamized skill. Of course, Milam and her crazy skill. A skill that lets her see the truth, but only what she wants to see. Anyway, to run interference, Milam will want to see something interesting, so in this regard a slime with a unique skill is already interesting enough for her, hence it is highly likely that she will not notice until Master meets her in person. I'll deal with that when the time comes. Let's end this. Rimmeru watched as the orc disaster unleashed its gaseous heads once again, before the heads consumed all detached parts of its body. It then regenerated fully, turned around and moved to attack Rimmeru once again. Too slow. Rimmeru had already transformed into a diminished version of his slime form, the same size as his original self, before wrapping himself around the orc. A short struggle later, and the orc disaster had been completely swallowed. It had perished, and the war was over. Asterisk 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 asterisk. He had only wanted the best for his people. His family. For that, he was willing to do anything, bear any burden. Even if he were eventually hated by his people, he was willing to do what he must for them. He ripped off his own limbs to feed his people as they starved. He walked across the deserted sands in search of food. He was ready to risk the wrath of the storm dragon Veldora if it meant that his people were fed. Which brought him to his position now. Eaten by another Majin, after consuming countless other monsters. Ogres, lizardmen, hundreds of other weaker races within the Jura forest. Countless mindless monsters, and even his own kin, all in a bid to satiate this endless hunger. His name was Geld, and now, he was dead. Don't worry, I will take care of your people from now on. He turned to his left, only to see the blue-haired Majin standing by his side. The Majin then turned to face him, and smiled. Rest for now, you and all those that died will be remembered. And make sure to watch over that son of yours. He will make you proud. He had no words. All he ever wanted was for his people to live happily. And now they could. Thank you. 2 simple words to express his undying gratitude towards this Majin. A chance to watch over his son despite his death. To welcome his people despite their actions. He would not question it. It seemed that their fortune was finally looking bright. The orc disaster has been absorbed, master. But there seems to be a problem. What kind of problem, Seal? A minor one, master. There is something that I do not understand. What is it? A dark purple shard, master. For some reason the orc disaster had it attached to its soul. They seem to be a part of a soul, but to who remains the question. Quote. It does not seem to belong to anyone we know, master, nor anyone we have met. It does not seem to be dangerous either. Keep an eye on it, Seal. I will. Ignoring the curious issue about the dark shard within his imaginary space, Rimmeru rubbed his head with both of his hands. Currently dealing with the aftermath of the whole orc fiasco, Rimmeru already felt done with everything. The Kijin had sworn loyalty to him once again, immediately taking up their previous posts. Rimmeru had also already formed the Jura Tempest Federation alongside Trainee and her sisters, with members consisting of the lizardmen, led by Abel, the orcs, now led by Geld, as well as the goblins and the Kijin. He had also become the chancellor of the Jura Tempest Federation once again, and with it came the bane of his existence. Paperwork. At least there wasn't much paperwork at the moment, considering that they were still developing, and paper was a luxury to have, but Rimmeru didn't really care about all that. He had also named all the orcs with proper names this time, with Seal helping him with an artificial name generator for orcs that she took out of his memories. He sort of felt bad for his laziness the last time around. The orcs had immediately adjusted to their new lives and had already started to train and develop their construction skills with the dwarves. In fact, the building that Rimmeru was sitting in right now was built by them overnight. It had been turned into his office for the time being, until a better residence was completely built. Lastly, Rimmeru was currently preparing for King Gazel's arrival and his duel with said king, along with Vesta's overdue employment. He still wanted to make a good impression with Gazel, as he was a staunch ally throughout the past timeline. He also needed Vesta to slave Ahem work away and develop the necessary technologies for the nation. Overall, everything was proceeding with little to no hiccups. There was just small issue, excluding the whole shard nonsense of course. The issue being Gabaru. Yes, Gabaru. He had somehow managed to offend Xian and Shuna, so much so that Shuna had force-fed Gabaru Xian's cooking for days now. Hell, even Benamaru was beating him up during training sessions with Hakuro, and that was without any orders or prompts. He had wanted to punish Gabaru for his idiotic thoughts and actions with Shizu, but not this extent nor so soon. What in the world happened? It seems that he said something so irredeemable that Shuna of all people lost her temper. Not that I disagree with her, as Gabaru did receive the extra skill poison resistance through this endeavor. This will eventually help him when he is paired with Ultima in the future. Can you tell me what he said to piss Shuna off to this extent? Asked Rimmeru, wondering how could Shuna lose her temper so easily. No, master, just know that Gabaru deserves this. I see. It also seems that Shizu has joined in, master. Are you serious? How do you even piss her off? Lord Rimmeru. A voice interrupted his thoughts as a hobgoblin rushed into his office, panting and screaming. His eyes bulging in fear as he looked around, before finally relaxing after realizing that it was just him and his lord. Gobda, what do you need? Well, hesitated Gobda. I have a question. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Benamaru was currently making his way to the temporary orc residences to ensure that everything was going according to his lord's wishes. Despite being former enemies, the orcs had been invited to become the foundation of the workforce within the Jura Tempest Federation. What was the saying his lord had used? That yesterday's enemies are today's friends. He was still wrapping his head around this idea. He had already spoken to the new leader of the orcs, named Geld in honor of his fallen father, and found that the orc was loyal to a fault and was willing to repay his father's actions with his life in return for his people's salvation. He had already told the orc that as long as he paid back his debt through his actions and servitude, he would be absolved of his father's crimes. Benamaru had decided to put his past grudges aside for the betterment of the whole, but that did not mean that he was completely content with the idea. Perhaps that is what Lord Rimmeru wanted to address. No, perhaps he even foresaw the whole thing. Remembering his conversation with his master right before the confrontation, he realized that his master was genuinely worried about the path he could take if he let vengeance dictate his decisions. Revenge can consume a person, and they can be blinded to other factors beyond their control. Indeed, he had been blind to the orc's plight. Had he been put in a similar situation, Benamaru could not confidently say that he would not take the same actions. He had been blinded by his rage and anger, damning all the innocents as a result of the action of a few. All due to his desire for retribution. A cycle of revenge and death. Kill or be killed, kill and be killed. The strong prey on the weak, and it's the fault of the weak for being so. Retribution against who? The orcs. There was no use blaming the innocents when the perpetrator was dead. The Majin or demon lord behind all these actions. Demon lords always lord their power over others, and identifying the one responsible would not be easy. The world at large, monster kind was used to accepting the idea that might is right, and that the victor took everything while the loser lost everything. And I wish to change that. And yet Rimuru Tempest, now Chancellor of the Jura Tempest Federation, wanted to throw everything on its head and create a nation where monster kind can flourish. Together, tossing conceived notions to the winds in order to change the world in his image, and for the better. That is the only way that this world will change. Through power, influence, and example. Yes, in order to truly lead, one must have power, or else they will not be able to protect nor change anything. One must have influence, to ensure that change is enacted and preserved. One must also lead by example, as that is one of the best ways to earn trust and respect, demonstrating power while developing influence. Please think on that, Benamaru, as you fill the hole in your heart. I have, my lord. I finally see what you meant with those words. He would lead by following these concepts. To gain the strength for those around him to admire. To hold influence with his fellow monsters through respect and trust, not simply fear of his power. Lastly, to be the best that he can possibly be. In order to see what Rimmeru was trying to create. And to fill the current void in his heart. He was sure that his longtime friends agreed with him. Soe, Shion, Kurobe, his teacher Hakuro and his sister Shuna. He was certain that all of them would willingly throw away their grudges if it meant seeing the vision that Rimmeru would create. After all, ideals without power is wishful thinking and nonsense, while power without ideals is useless. The wise words of his lord once again, or at least something that Benamaru believes that his master would say. A scream off in the distance reminded him of Gabiru's plight. Never ever insult a woman's chest or body, even if indirectly. Especially his sister. Seems like I will need to take a detour to punish Gabiru again. Though I'm probably saving him instead. And I'm getting the feeling that he won't learn his lesson either way. Why did he have to call them fat? Asterisk 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 asterisk. You see, Lord Rimmeru. What you were asking of us was totally unreasonable. Back to Gobta and Rimmeru, Gobta was complaining once more about what he viewed as completely and ludicrous workload. He first complained about how he had to fight against an orc champion during the orc disaster scenario, then also how he was expected to train with both the old man and the black-haired witch constantly. Didn't you want to get stronger, Gobta? You need to suffer in order to grow both in strength and as an individual. Answered Rimmeru, shaking his head at what was probably the 20th or so time that Gobta had complained to him about training. I didn't know that they would try to kill me, Lord Rimmeru. This is too much. You are expecting too much. I don't wanna deal with the old fart or the witch anymore. Yelled Gobta. Old fart, to think that you have gotten this confident in yourself, muttered someone from behind him. Very well, I shall have you take responsibility for your words then. A raven-haired individual, on the other hand, simply let a small smile show on her face. One that seemed to freeze hell itself despite her moniker as the Conqueror of Flames. Gobta slowly turned around, shivering all the while. His face contorted in complete and utter fear. After making eye contact with both of his teachers, he quickly turned around and looked Rimmeru in the eye, silently begging for forgiveness and salvation. Unfortunately for the hobgoblin, none came, and he was instead dragged out of the office struggling for his very existence. A pause of silence, before the sound of a pen being placed down on wood resounded throughout the room. Rimmeru, now by himself, sighed deeply. He felt frustrated, for a completely different reason now. As much as Gobta's words were simple complaints, Rimmeru still felt hurt that he was expecting too much from them. Even though I know that Gobta is just trying to slack off. I can't help but think that he has a point. He stood up, and walked around his office, before looking out the window. Am I expecting too much? Am I burdening them too much? I can't help but think that. Master, is there something wrong? Although both Seal and her master shared the same body and mind, Rimmeru had learned long ago how to keep even her in the dark regarding his true thoughts. His initial reasoning on the matter was to hide the contents of his hard drive in his former life from his eternal partner, but it ended up being too late for that. Nevertheless, he had still learned the technique, which was currently putting him in an awkward position. It's nothing, Seal, there is no need for you to worry about it. He didn't want to tell his subordinates the truth about his time travel experience. Initially, it was only due to his paranoia that his actions would result in a butterfly effect that would drastically affect the world at large. However, a new thought was slowly worming its way into his head. The thought that he should not burden his subordinates, because they would not be able to handle it. It was a stupid thought, as the last time he had burdened them with ridiculous things, and they all accomplished their tasks effectively and successfully. But, my subordinates now are not the same as my subordinates from before. The logic behind his thoughts was flawed, and he knew this. Past or future, his subordinates were the same people at their core. Benamaru was still a Kijin that specialized in fire magic and leadership, while Soe still specialized in ninjutsu and intelligence gathering. But they were not the same people that suffered alongside him, nor were they the same subordinates that had died for him. Their memories, their experiences, fundamentally, they were not the same people, which could easily be rectified through granting their memories of the previous timeline. Those same people that followed him then would continue to follow him now. But that ran the risk of changing their decisions in certain situations. That also ran the risk of overcomplicating things and potentially making the final fight even harder. And, there was something else that was bothering him. That preventing Rimmeru from sharing his experiences with those loyal to him. To truly bring back his trusted friends and family. Do I deserve it? Veldora had been an exception, as both his sworn and actual brother, alongside being the individual that had named him the first time around. Their soul corridor and the uncanny strength of it would have made it nearly impossible to hide things from him anyways. But as for all the other subordinates, what about them? Did he get to take away their second chance like that? He knew that this line of thought was stupid, and yet he couldn't help but think of things this way. Perhaps he should focus more on what he can do rather than what his subordinates can do. Through power, influence and example. A knock on the door interrupted his line of thought. Rimmeru-san, are you busy at the moment? Asked a voice. Rimmeru took a few moments to compose himself, before walking towards the door and opening it. No, I'm not. I was about to take a break. Do you want to walk with me for a bit, Shizu? Shizu nodded, before walking alongside him down the hallways and out the back door of the building. She wondered what was wrong, seeing Rimmeru so out of it. Despite Rimmeru's best efforts, a woman's intuition often exceeds the best-known capabilities of man. Is everything going well? How is Gobta's training going along? Rimmeru asked her, as they made their way outside. Shizu pursed her lips. It was clear to her that Rimmeru was trying to avoid a certain subject. However, it was true that she wanted to complain about Gobta despite already punishing him earlier with the paddle. He is doing well. Aside from his rebellious attitude and his lack of work ethic, he is a talented student. She started, before balling her hands into fists at a certain memory. However, even regular amounts of discipline could not exterminate his horrible desire to slack off whenever he pleases. He's even worse than Kenya, and that is saying something. Ah yes, you told me about him. The troublemaker, right? Yes. The little gremlin. It was his idea to put a chalk eraser on the top of the doorframe as I entered. It nearly hit me. Rimmeru laughed out loud. He had been told that Shizu had dodged it easily, but to think it caught her off guard. Don't laugh. Sorry. I just can't imagine. The Conqueror of Flames, Death by Chalk Eraser, PFFT. The black and white image of Shizu falling unconscious due to a chalk eraser had actually managed to make him forget about his thoughts just now. Rimmeru was then hit lightly on the back of the head with the sheath of her temporary sword, as her previous had broke in a spar with Benamaru. A dull thud rang out. Ow, HMPH. Shizu turned around and pouted to the side. Sorry, again, you mean it? Shizu questioned, mock seriousness showing on her face. Rimmeru paused for a second, looked her straight in the eye. No, a beat of silence. PFF'd, snort. The two broke out in laughter. Classic Shizu, always manages to cheer me up. The same as Seal really. Always managing to make me smile with their words. I really don't deserve them. Laughing, the two arrived to the cliff where Rimmeru had shown her images of modern Japan. Only this time, they were overlooking the growing town that Rimmeru had created. And it was still getting larger. It looks amazing. To think you would be able to do this in such a short period of time. Shizu said, her hair blowing in the wind. I wouldn't have been able to do it without everyone contributing in their own way. I only pointed them in the right direction. Rimmeru answered. You don't have to be so humble, Rimmeru. You made this happen. I know Shizu. I know. He knew that he shouldn't be so humble. He knew that he should have pride in what he had and will accomplish in the future. But it was hard holding pride in something knowing that his actions would eventually cause its downfall. Master, you really should be prouder of your accomplishments. You can afford to be more arrogant and happy. He knew that both of them were correct. But at the same time, he could not bring himself to follow their words. Rimmeru sat down, letting his legs dangle off the cliff, his eyes gazing at the town of Rimmeru, current capital and only city in the Jura Tempest Federation. He noticed Shizu kneel behind him, while taking in the entire atmosphere. Suddenly, Rimmeru felt two soft hands grab each side of his head, before noticing that they had gently placed it down onto something soft. He looked to his right, and noticed black leggings. The infamous lap pillow, opening square bracket quote closing square bracket. He felt as though someone was jealously staring at him from somewhere. He ignored the feeling for now. He instead focused on the face looking down on him from above. Her raven black pupils staring deep into his own golden irises again. You know, you can also talk to me if you need to, alright? Shizu said softly, her hands running through Rimmeru's platinum blue strands of hair. Rimmeru was quiet for a bit. He did not want to burden her too much, not now, and certainly not this level of burden. He wasn't even sure he should talk to her about any of it, for that matter. But he did not regret saving her if it meant spending time with her like this. He also really needed to spend some quality time with Seal as well. He couldn't have come this far without her either. Opening square bracket quote dot 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 exclamation mark dot 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 quote closing square bracket. All in all, he really appreciated the offer. Thank you Shizu, he said, before closing his eyes. I'll be fine, no need to worry. Even if what he said was partially a lie, he would not dwell on it anymore. He relaxed instead, listening to the calm sound of grass flowing in the breezing wind. And the smell of beautiful iris flowers. To be continued.